Hello challengers, this is a rather informal video, some might say rough and ready, trying to explain how to use Anquet OMN. I've not got time right now to organise it with timestamps and the like and make it more polished than it is, but hopefully it'll help anybody who's new to OMN and is trying to work out how to use it. We'll start with looking what we've got on the screen. So in the top left hand corner we've got the type of map that we're looking at, and we can change that to a 1 in 25 map. We can change it to a road map. That's quite useful for having an overview if you want to see a bigger area. And we can change it to a GB map, which has got a lot less detail on it. But because route sheets have to be based on a 1 in 50 map, that's what we'll bring up onto the screen. Next to that we have a search function. So if I search for Portavadie, it'll come up with either a list of places if there's various of that name or just one. Double click on that, close that box, it's taken us to Portavadie. Also in that search function you can search by grid reference, so you choose grid reference and then you put in whatever grid reference you're looking for. You can tell it to take you there and it will be in the middle of the screen, but it's often easier if you put a waypoint and then tell it to go to, and then you can see exactly where it is. I'll just delete that waypoint. We then have GM, which is the GPX manager, GE, which is the GPX editor, a print function, some settings. That's the map store, never use that one, I doubt that you'd need to, and some other options which if you want to change the colour of your line in general or all of your icons, that's the place to go. Not something I really use very much at all. I do sometimes go into the settings, but you'll want your distances set to kilometres and your height to metres for the purposes of your route sheet. You'll want the national grid of Great Britain. You actually want your precision at 100 metres, so down at the bottom here you've got a 6-digit grid reference being given, and you do want the Ordnance Survey prefix letters. There are other options that you can have. I would recommend protected mode, because then you can't accidentally move a waypoint unless in the editing you want to be able to move them really easily. If you've got protected mode on, you have to press the shift key before you can move any point. Without it, if you're trying to move the map around, you can accidentally grab a waypoint. Hopefully that'll all become a lot more apparent later on when we get into actually plotting a route. I'm not going to change any of the styles and icons for now. Let's get into how we go about plotting the route. Actually, first let's just go over here. You can change the zoom level using a roller on your mouse if you have one, but otherwise up in the top right corner over here there is controls where you can go in big lumps or you can slide it. And I now realise it'd probably be more useful if I made my mouse a little bit more obvious on the screen. So I will be back any moment. Have a nice bigger red mouse pointer that you can hopefully see a little bit better. So let's now set about finding a start point of the TGO challenge and plotting a route. So let's go for Portavadie. And to start plotting a route, you right click or opposite click if your mouse is left-handed, and you start route. You can then just merrily click away, and I'm going to assume that this person is following the Cowell Way, and I'm not going to go very far. Just for demonstration purposes, I'll just do a little bit of the route. Now, clearly, same with all digital mapping software, the more waypoints you put in, the more precise your measurement will be. So we get to the road here and we want to end our route there. So we opposite click again, right click and end route. To find out the statistics on that that line that we've just plotted. You can point at it and the default settings will give you certain information just under the mouse pointer. So we can see here that it's 3.71 kilometres, ascent of 121 metres, descent of 72 metres. It gives you a position of where I'm pointing right at that moment, and it tells you what the leg is between the two waypoints, which probably isn't overly relevant. The other way that we can see that is we go to the GPX editor. The GPX manager and the GPX editor are the two levels of file handling. So if we open the GPX editor, there is the new route that I have just plotted. We might want to give that a name to make it more obvious to you later on what it is. So we will call that TGO Challenge 2024 Day 1. And we can also see in the GPX editor the stats for that day. We saw the summary of them on the screen, and this is the full set. You can scroll down to see everything, or you can maximise that box. If you're eagle-eyed, you may notice these are slightly different from what was seen on the screen a few moments ago. It would be exactly the same if I hadn't just deleted and then had to replot this route. Now, if we want to plot another route to go into that same folder, we can just close the GPX editor and again, right click, start route, and we can start plotting some more. We've obviously just got to the edge of the screen here, so I'm using the arrows on the keyboard to just take us over to the right. And we're also going to want to go north, so I'll also use the arrows, the up arrow on the keyboard to move that down. Not going to be overly precise in plotting this. And let's stop that one there. So we'll end that route there. And again, if I just point at it, I can see that that's 4.9 kilometres and all the other stats on it. And if I go to the GPX editor, it is now there under the original one, and I can right click on it, rename, and we'll give that a name that's meaningful. So if you've just plotted that and you look at the distance and you think, oh, I can walk further than 4.9 kilometres today, then if you just click on it and go down to continue route, then you can do exactly that. You can continue the route. And you can do that as many times as you like. So you've just seen I've just stopped the route again. I can then continue the route and just carry on. Whilst I've got that menu open, so once again I'm pointing at the line that we've just plotted, I'm right clicking on it, and you can also look at the route profile, and that brings up the profile across the bottom. That one's relatively smooth, so the stats it's giving us are probably quite accurate. Sometimes there's a lot of little jitters in it, which indicates there's a lot of noise that you maybe need to do a more manual calculation to get a meaningful height ascent number for the day. Just click anywhere on the map and that route profile goes away. So we've now in GPX editor got 2 days, and you might think, well, I'll just change the name of this file so that I know that what this is, but you don't actually have that option. What you have the option here, you can change the line style, so it's currently a bright blue. We could change it to transparent green, and that'll do it for the whole route, everything that's under there. But you can't change the name of that file from this menu. You can change it, I'll get there in a moment. But whilst I'm talking about changing the colour of lines, it's actually quite useful if you alternate colours so you can see where one day ends and another begins. So rather than at the top level changing all of the colours, if I go down to day 1, right click on it, go to route line style and go to transparent red, you can now see that that day 1 ends here, and you can see where day 2 is. And if you click on each in turn, you can see that one's red and that one's green. Now we want to change the name of this, and we also want to save it. So we're going to select that route and we are going to save it to the GPX manager, which is this piece of paper with a down arrow on it. If you want to save everything that's in there, you use the double down arrow, but we just want to save this one file, so the single down arrow, and that has now saved it. So if we now go to the GPX manager, under my routes, we have got new GPX1. So what I'm going to do now is right click on new GPX1, and at this point we can rename it. So you can only rename the top level file within GPX Manager. You can rename the individual days within GPX Editor. So that is now saved under a name that is recognisable. And that has now fed through to the GPX Editor too. And you've still got the individual days under there. Now, if you want to start a whole different route because you've just decided, actually, maybe I don't want to go that way, maybe I want to follow some different tracks out of here, and you don't want to get confused by having both on the screen at the same time, then click on that one, and you want the piece of paper with the X, which as it says is close, and that then closes that file. I'm just going to close this one that's just an empty file as well. If you now go back to your GPX Manager, right, that hasn't appeared because it's actually already open down the bottom here. So I just need to bring it back up. I've minimised it rather than closing it. Double click on that file, and there we go. It's open again, back in the GPX editor. We'll just close that again for the moment using the piece of paper with the X on it. Do I want to save the changes? I've not actually done anything meaningful, so I won't on this occasion. I will just close the GPX editor and GPX manager for the moment. And I'll just start plotting from over here. I'll start a route. Use the arrows again to move the screen. That will do. So let's say I've plotted that. I go to styles, route line style, change it to red. Transparent's actually pretty good because you can then see what's under it. I then open my GPX editor and I realise, oh, I've not saved that in the file that I wanted to, so I'll just give it a name anyway. And now I'll go to GPX Manager. I'll open the file that I'd already created with the first 2 days in, and then I can simply drag and drop that day into the file I already had. That is now empty, so it can be closed. So I've now got the first 3 days in the same file. Let's say that we suddenly realise that we want to go somewhere completely different on day 3. We don't like that version at all. You can simply click on the dustbin and it says, are you sure you want to delete it? Yes, I do. You're back to just the 2 days. So let's save that, close that, and go to the GPX Manager. You now have a GPX file here with the first 2 days in it. If you want to export that so that you can share it with your route sheet, send it to Challenge Control with your route sheet, then you've got the option here of importing and exporting from GPX Manager. So what we want to do here is to export. So we're going to hit the GM down arrow. That will take us to a folder. You can navigate in the usual way to decide exactly where you want to put it, and you then just simply save. You can change the file name again at this point if you want to, but simply save that. Now, if you want to get rid of a route that's in your GPX Manager, you can simply delete it. Do I want to delete it? Yes, I do. We now have no routes in there at all. Let's say I want to give it a different overarching file name rather than just have it in my routes. So we can, because let's say you're going to end up with TGO Challenge 2024, 2025, 2026 in here, you'll want to know them apart at the top level. So we'll hit on OK. We've now got a separate folder over on the left, and we want to import a route that we know we've got, but it's a GPX file, it's saved somewhere. So we'll go to the import button. So that's the GPX Manager, GM, and the up arrow. We navigate to where that is filed. We click on it, we open, and there it is back. And that has automatically opened it. So it's also open in the GPX editor. The GPX Manager and the GPX editor, it takes a little bit of getting used to what you can do from each level of this. This is the top level file structure, and then this is the detail of the of that file, what's within that file. And as we saw earlier, there are certain things you can rename from within GPX editor, otherwise you have to rename them from within GPX Manager. You can only import and export within the GPX Manager. I'll just close the GPX editor and GPX Manager and just mention one other thing, which is down at the bottom here, there is a readout, and wherever your mouse is pointing it gives you the grid reference for that position. What you do need to be careful about is if you point at somewhere to take a grid reference, you then don't then accidentally move your mouse and then write down the grid reference of where it's now pointing, because it does confuse the vetters in challenge control, where you'll say you're going to be camping by the phone box at Millhouse, which incidentally I wouldn't recommend, and you accidentally moved your mouse and you give a grid reference over on some crags over here. I should probably also mention dropping a waypoint. If we right click at this point and say add waypoint, it puts a waypoint there. If we then right click on that waypoint, we can then change the style, and let's say we don't want any of those. We'll go to more. In the outdoors, we've got a campsite. Double click on that, it changes it to a picture of a tent. So we then close that menu, opposite click on it again, go back down to the styles, and we'll change it to a medium icon with name, and we'll give it a name by editing, and we'll call that Camp 1. Wouldn't recommend that you actually camp there, probably not a great place, and particularly being so close to the start, not to mention the fact it's in the middle of a road. But there we go, it now has a picture of a tent and Camp 1. Might be useful to you, but you can very happily plot a route without needing to put any extra waypoints labelling things. It can be very useful to label things for your own benefit. We don't need that on your route sheets or for challenge control. I hope something in there was useful to you. Otherwise, why have you watched this far? And if there is anything else you would like to know, or there's any other more in-depth description you would like on anything that I've glossed over in this video, then just drop an email to TGO Challenge email address. Either put it for my attention or just make clear that it's a question about OMN video, and that will get passed to me, and I'm happy to make any other further quick explanatory videos about any aspect.